Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into something relatable. Human shyness. We're drawing from this fascinating source, human shyness, an AI-driven analysis. And we know you want the key insights, fast but thorough. So we've done the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, our mission today is really to unpack shyness. Where does it come from? How does it affect things like confidence, just general well-being? And interestingly, what can AI tell us about all this? We're aiming for those useful insights, those aha moments, but without burying you in data.
Exactly. And what's cool is this AI report pulled from everywhere. History, psychology, biology, cultural stuff.
A real mix.
Yeah, to give us this distilled but really broad view.
Okay.
Let's dive right in. At its core, what is shyness?
Fundamentally, it's that tendency we have to feel awkward, maybe worried or tense in social situations.
Especially with strangers.
Especially with people you don't know well, yeah. It's that inner discomfort, maybe feeling really self-conscious, nervous. I mean, you've likely felt that yourself at some point.
Oh, absolutely. That pre-meeting jitter, for sure. But it's more than just a quick feeling, isn't it? The report mentions physical stuff, too.
It does. It's not just in your head. It shows up physically.
Wow.
Blushing is a classic one, right? Your face gets hot.
Totally.
Or feeling tongue-tied, like you just can't find the words. Maybe your hands shake a bit, or you feel short of breath even. It's a whole body experience, really.
So it's not just, feeling a bit off. It can actually get in the way of things we want to do. The report talks about a functional perspective.
Yes, exactly. From that angle, shyness is basically social discomfort that stops you from achieving your goals. Personal goals, social ones, professional.
Like promotions or asking someone out.
Yeah, think about it. So much relies on interacting with people, right? Building relationships, getting ahead at work, just speaking up for yourself. Shyness can be a real obstacle there. The kind of surprising thing is how this internal feeling has such concrete external consequences.
Which makes sense why it's often seen negatively, especially now when being assertive is so valued.
Yeah.
But the report is clear. Shyness isn't just one thing. It's a spectrum.
Absolutely. It ranges, from feeling slightly uneasy before speech to maybe being so inhibited you can barely make small talk.
Big difference.
Huge difference. And recognizing that range is key because it means how we understand it and how we might deal with it needs to be flexible too.
Okay, so we have this internal awkwardness, physical signs, it can hold us back. The report breaks it down further, though, into components. Cognitive, affective, physiological, behavioral. Let's unpack those. Cognitively, what's happening?
Cognitively, it's all about the thoughts that drive the shyness. Often it's negative self-talk, that inner critic.
I'm going to sound stupid.
Exactly. Or they won't like me. There's a big fear of being judged negatively. Sometimes it's social perfectionism, too, setting impossible standards for yourself socially.
Right.
And self-blame is huge. If an interaction feels weird, the immediate thought is, it's my fault. The key thing here is how these thoughts create this cycle, this loop of anxiety, and then wanting to avoid situations.
That makes total sense, like a negative feedback loop in your head.
Yeah.
And then the affective part, the feelings involved.
Right, the emotions. Embarrassment is a big one, that awful feeling of being exposed. Self-consciousness, obviously. Shame can creep in. Low self-esteem often goes hand in hand with it. Anxiety, of course.
And loneliness.
Loneliness, too, yeah. Because if shyness stops you connecting, that's a natural consequence. It's kind of surprising just how many different negative emotions get bundled up in shyness.
And we already touched on the physiological, the body's reaction.
Yeah, the heart pounding, face flushing, maybe sweating, dry mouth, trembling.
Feeling sick sometimes.
Can even get to feeling nauseous, yeah. And these physical things are often automatic, right? Which just makes you feel even more self-conscious and anxious. It's not just mental, your whole body is reacting.
Right, like your body betrays you. And finally, the behavioral bits. What people actually do or maybe don't do.
Behaviorally, you see things like social inhibition, just holding back. Avoiding eye contact is common, gaze aversion.
Looking away?
Exactly. People might just skip social events, or if they go, they kind of retreat into themselves. You might notice speech hesitations, nervous habits like fidgeting. Shy people often prefer to hang back, observe before jumping in, if they jump in at all. The main takeaway is that these outward actions are usually driven by those inner anxieties and negative thoughts.
So it sounds like all these pieces, thoughts, feelings, body behavior, they all connect and feed into each other.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic cycle. Like negative thoughts before a party trigger anxiety, which causes physical symptoms. Maybe you feel shaky, so you decide not to go.
Instant relief, maybe.
Temporary relief, yes. but it stops you from challenging those negative thoughts, stops you from practicing social skills, so the cycle just keeps going.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of shyness itself. Now, the report really stresses distinguishing shyness from introversion and social anxiety disorder, or SAD. People mix these up all the time.
They do, and getting it right is really important. Introversion is basically about where you get your energy. Introverts prefer quieter settings, they direct energy inwards, lots of socializing drains them, they need alone time to recharge.
It's not fear-based.
No, crucially, it's not driven by fear of judgment. An introvert might skip a party because they genuinely prefer a quiet night in. It refuels them.
Right, they choose solitude, whereas a shy person might want to go but feels too anxious.
Exactly. Now, social anxiety disorder, SAD, that's different again. It's much more severe.
How so? Compared to just being very shy.
SAD involves this intense, persistent fear of being scrutinized, and the fear is way out of proportion to the actual situation. It causes major distress, really messes with daily life. People with SAD often go to extreme lengths to avoid social situations, and if they can't avoid them, they experience extreme anxiety, maybe even panic attacks. Shyness is discomfort. SAD can be crippling. And it's worth noting that really severe chronic shyness can sometimes increase the risk of developing SAD. The intensity and the level of impairment are the key differences.
That's a critical distinction. And the report mentions shy extroverts. Sounds like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But it shows shyness isn't just about being quiet or withdrawn. A shy extrovert actually enjoys socializing, gets energy from being around people. That's the extrovert part.
Okay.
But internally, they still feel that significant discomfort, anxiety, self-consciousness in social settings. They might even seem outgoing, especially if they know people well. But underneath, there's that fear of judgment or rejection. The surprise here is you really can't judge a book by its cover when it comes to shyness.
Wow, so someone can be the life of the party but still be churning inside with anxiety.
Precisely. It really drives home that shyness is about those internal states, thoughts, and feelings, not just behavior. And understanding these differences is vital. You don't want to pressure an introvert to be someone they're not, or medicalize normal shyness, or fail to get proper help for someone genuinely suffering from SAD.
Yeah, the report's comparison table is super helpful for that. Okay, let's switch gears. Where does shyness actually come from? It's not just one thing, right? The report calls it a biopsychosocial tapestry.
That's a great phrase for it. Yeah, it's really complex. It involves our biology, what we're kind of born with, our predispositions.
Nature.
Nature, exactly. Then our developmental experiences nurture how we grow up, and our psychological mechanisms, how our minds work, how we think about ourselves and social stuff.
Okay, let's pull on that biological thread first. Is there a genetic link? Are some people just wired to be shy?
It definitely looks like there's a genetic component. Research suggests maybe 20 to 30% of the differences between people and shyness levels could be down to genes. Yeah. Specific genes, especially ones involved with neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, are being looked at, but it's really complicated. No single shyness gene. But the takeaway is our genes can kind of set a baseline vulnerability or tendency.
And what about the brain itself? Does a shy brain look or act differently?
Yeah, interestingly, it seems so. Studies show increased activity in certain brain areas for shy people when they're processing social cues, often areas involved in emotion and cognitive control.
Like the brain's working harder.
Maybe, or differently. The amygdala, that's key for fear and novelty response, often reacts more strongly to unfamiliar faces in shy folks, especially those who were inhibited kids. It's like their brains are maybe more sensitive to potential social threats from the get-go.
That's fascinating. It's almost like a built-in alarm system that's a bit more sensitive.
Could be. And there are even physiological markers, things like respiratory sinus arrhythmia, that's the natural heart rate variation with breathing, linked to emotional regulation. It shows different patterns. And some studies found that how an infant's heart rate responds to social stress can actually predict shyness later on. What's really interesting is that these biological responses can appear before the shyness behavior really shows up, suggesting biology might set the stage in a way.
Wow, so it's not just upbringing. There could be this underlying biological sensitivity.
It seems very likely. And there are even some potential gender differences in brain patterns related to shyness, and hormones like cortisol, the stress hormone, might play a role too, higher levels perhaps linked to more shyness.
But it's not destiny, right? The report stresses the biology interacts with environment.
Absolutely crucial point. Genetics and biology might create a predisposition, but our environment, our experiences, they really shape how that shyness actually plays out.
So a supportive family could buffer it.
Exactly. A supportive environment can buffer it, while negative experiences like being teased or criticized harshly can amplify it. So even with that initial sensitivity, childhood experiences, social feedback, learning coping skills, all that massively influences whether it develops into persistent shyness. Nature and nurture are constantly talking to each other.
Makes sense. Okay, so what about those developmental paths? Are there critical periods? When does shyness typically emerge or change?
It can pop up at different times, but infancy, early childhood, and adolescence seem particularly important. In infancy, you see precursors like behavioral inhibition to the unfamiliar. About 15–20% of babies are just naturally more wary, more distressed by new things.
The cautious baby.
The cautious ones, yeah. Then in early childhood, things like really persistent stranger anxiety or separation anxiety can be early signs.
And what kinds of experiences in childhood are most influential?
Several things matter. The quality of attachment with caregivers is huge. Insecure attachment can breed anxiety. Parenting styles are important too.
Like helicopter parents.
Overprotective parenting, yeah, can unintentionally teach fear. But also overly critical or cold parenting can make shy tendencies worse. Not having enough chances to socialize early on can hinder skill development. And then peer experiences being teased, left out, that can really cement shyness. Interestingly, one study linked maternal insensitivity particularly to stronger shyness in boys.
Childhood sounds critical. What about the teenage years? That's a social minefield.
Definitely. Adolescence is often a peak time for shyness to either appear for the first time or get much worse. Self-reported shyness jumps significantly in early adolescence.
By then.
It's likely a perfect storm, you know. Puberty changes, new cognitive abilities like being way more self-aware, shifting social roles, and suddenly caring a lot more about what peers think. Peer evaluation becomes huge. All this can crank up self-consciousness. The surprising thing is these pressures can trigger or worsen shyness, even in kids who weren't particularly shy before.
So it's not always there from the start. It can kind of activate later.
Not always, no. People follow different paths. Some stay low shy, some increase from adolescence into adulthood, and that group seems at higher risk for later mental health issues, unfortunately. And thankfully, some decrease in shyness over time.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, and you're right, some people develop late developing shyness in adolescence. It seems more tied to the specific social challenges of that age, not necessarily a deep-rooted temperament thing. It can be a reaction to a tough social scene or negative feedback.
Okay, biology and development set the stage. Let's dig into the psychological mechanisms, the thoughts, beliefs, self-perceptions that keep the shyness engine running.
Right. This is the internal landscape. A key feature is excessive self-focus. Shy people often have their attention turned inward, very self-conscious, constantly thinking about how they're coming across.
Like having an internal spotlight always on you.
Exactly. It's exhausting. And this is often fueled by negative beliefs, global negative views like, I'm boring, or I'm unattractive, or just convinced others will dislike them.
That find me annoying.
Yeah, or if I talk about myself, I'll seem self-centered. And if things feel awkward, boom, self-blame. These beliefs create what's been called a cage of social anxiety, really limits freedom. The core insight is how powerful these internal stories are in driving the behavior.
And how do they explain things to themselves? Like successes versus failures. The report mentioned attributional style.
Yes, that's crucial. Shy individuals often attribute bad social outcomes, awkward moments, perceived failures to internal causes, it's me, stable causes, it's always like this, and uncontrollable causes, I can't change it.
I messed up because I'm just socially hopeless.
Exactly. But if something good happens socially, they might brush it off as luck, or something external, not crediting themselves, oh, they were just being nice. This pattern locks in those negative self-views and the feeling of powerlessness. It's quite surprising how consistent the self-blame is.
That sounds incredibly demoralizing, like you're programmed to see the worst in yourself socially.
It really can be. And sociological ideas add another layer. This concept of the competent other, comparing yourself to this idealized, super smooth social butterfly.
Which makes you feel even worse.
Right, especially in cultures that really value extroversion. It sets an impossibly high bar. And then how others react over time can create this moral career of shyness. People label you shy, you start to see yourself that way, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So it's not just internal thoughts, it's internalizing how you think others see you.
Precisely. And those negative emotions, anxiety, self-doubt, they can even affect information processing in interesting ways. While intense emotion can cloud thinking, some research hints that milder negative feelings might actually make people a bit more careful, more analytical.
Really? How so?
It's like the anxiety prompts a bit more caution, maybe thinking things through more systematically. So surprisingly, the anxiety linked to shyness isn't always a cognitive negative.
That's unexpected. Little silver lining, maybe.
Yeah.
But overall, this web of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, it sounds like it really locks shyness in place.
Absolutely. It's that self-sustaining cycle we talked about. Negative thoughts, anxiety, physical symptoms, avoidance, which reinforces the negative thoughts because you never test them out. That's why understanding and maybe restructuring those core negative thoughts is so central to interventions.
Okay, great overview of the individual experience. Let's zoom out now. The report really emphasizes how shyness is viewed differently across time and cultures. It's not always seen as a negative, right?
Not at all. How shyness is experienced, understood, valued, it's hugely shaped by history and culture. What counts as shy and whether that's good, bad, or neutral varies enormously.
Let's go back in time. Ancient Greece and Rome, big on public speaking. How did they see timidity?
Well, public life and effective oratory were highly valued, especially for male citizens. So excessive timidness in public probably wasn't seen favorably. It hindered participation.
Made you seem less capable.
Likely, yes, though they didn't have our exact concept of shyness. But later, in some philosophical or religious groups, silence and contemplation gained some respect. Strategic quietness, perhaps?
Interesting. What about medieval Europe? Did things like monasticism change the view?
Yes, within monasteries, silence and inner focus were virtues. So for monks and nuns, quietness was good. But in wider feudal society, timidity, especially in men, might link to weakness. For women, though, Christian ideals of modesty often meant being demure and quiet was seen positively.
And the Renaissance, back to valuing outward expression.
For men in public life, yes, eloquence was prized again. But for women, often the ideal was still silence, domesticity, quietness linked to female virtue. This era also saw philosophers exploring self-consciousness, laying groundwork for later ideas about shyness.
It's striking how gender norms dictated the value of quietness. Fast forward to the Enlightenment and Victorian eras.
The Enlightenment valued reason, but also sentiment, inner experience. Think Rousseau valuing solitude. The Victorian era still had strong gender divides. Female modesty and timidity often seen as natural, virtuous. But for men, shyness was increasingly a disadvantage, hindering success in an industrializing world. Even Darwin was apparently puzzled by shyness, wondering about its evolutionary purpose.
And then the 20th and 21st century, psychology steps in.
Exactly. More systematic study begins. Distinctions emerged between shyness, introversion, etc. Some figures like Zimbardo even worried shyness was increasing due to modern pressures, technology. The big picture. How shyness is valued really mirrors what society prizes at the time: public performance versus introspection. Today in the West, with the focus on assertiveness, shyness often feels like a liability.
Okay, let's talk cross-culturally now. We know Western societies can be critical. What about Eastern cultures?
Huge difference offer. In many Eastern cultures, China, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, for instance, shyness or quietness is frequently viewed more positively, or at least neutrally.
How so?
It can be seen as a sign of maturity, respect, thoughtfulness, good manners. There's sometimes a cultural saying like, talk more, make more mistakes. So reserve is valued. What the West might see as lack of confidence, the East might interpret quite differently.
So being quiet isn't automatically read as awkward or lacking confidence.
Not necessarily. In some cases, shyness has even been linked to good things like academic success. In Japan, where many self-identify as shy, cultural values like harmony, avoiding shame, these might contribute to both higher reported shyness and more social acceptance of it. Contrast that with somewhere like Israel, where confidence is highly praised and reported shyness is lower.
That's a stark difference. And it shows up in behavior, too, not just self-reports.
Definitely. Observational studies comparing, say, Chinese and Canadian kids in speech tasks found Chinese children showed more gaze aversion, spoke less. Cultural expectations clearly shape how shyness looks and feels. Gender norms play a role, too.
It really highlights how subjective our judgments are, based on our own cultural lens.
Precisely. And it means Western-based interventions might not fit well elsewhere. We need cultural sensitivity, though it's worth noting globalization is shifting things. In some urban parts of collectivist societies, like in China, shyness might be viewed more negatively now. There's this potential global drift towards valuing assertiveness, which could make being shy feel harder everywhere.
The report summary table on this is really useful. Okay, let's get into the impact of shyness. It's clearly more than just feeling awkward. It has real consequences.
Oh, absolutely. It can cast a long shadow, affecting your mind, your body, your social life, even your life path.
Let's start with the psychological impact. What's the internal toll?
Internally, it often means dealing with loneliness, low self-esteem, that constant negative inner voice, heightened self-consciousness, always worrying about judgment, sometimes even confusion about identity, especially growing up. Self-criticism is very common. The emotional burden can be really significant.
Sounds exhausting and isolating. And the link to broader mental health issues.
Unfortunately, shyness is a known risk factor. It's strongly linked to anxiety disorders, especially SAD, as we mentioned. Also increases vulnerability to depression, sometimes substance use as a coping mechanism. Shy folks also tend to report more physical symptoms without a clear cause and more school-related stress.
So mental and physical well-being can take a hit. What about thinking cognitive function?
It's a bit nuanced there. Some links to slower response times, maybe, but not lower intelligence. Interestingly, shy people often show more risk aversion in decisions can mean missed opportunities, but sometimes means more caution.
Which can be good sometimes.
Could be. And as we touched on, those negative emotions might sometimes lead to more systematic thinking. Shyness has also been linked to academic procrastination, possibly due to self-focus getting in the way of the task. So the cognitive impact isn't simply negative across the board.
A more complex picture. What about the obvious stuff? Social life, relationships?
Socially, the effects are pretty direct. Often fewer close friends, less participation in activities, difficulty starting and keeping relationships going. And that reserved behavior can get misinterpreted, seen as aloof, unfriendly, uninterested.
Which pushes people away.
Exactly, leading to rejection, more isolation. It can become a vicious cycle.
Sounds tough to break.
And academic and career paths. How does shyness impact those? Research links it to lower achievement sometimes, maybe in language skills, difficulties adjusting to school, like being hesitant to ask questions or join discussions. At university, shyness, along with things like avoiding uncertainty, can predict lower grades.
And in the workplace.
Especially in Western cultures valuing assertiveness, it can mean fewer promotions, being overlooked for leadership. It hinders networking, self-promotion, assertive communication, things often needed to get ahead. It can create this negative cascade. Fear, less participation, maybe poorer understanding, lower achievement, reinforces negative self-belief, lower self-esteem, more anxiety, depression.
Like a domino effect holding people back.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a point about risk aversion earlier.
Yes, while often a hindrance, that tendency towards caution could be beneficial in very specific high-stakes situations where being careful is vital. That idea of shyness made to save lives sometime.
An important nuance. Okay, how does shyness affect people around the shy person? And how does society react?
As we said, that quietness, avoiding eye contact, it's easily misread. Aloof, unfriendly, snobbish, uninterested, leads to rejection, fewer invitations, less warmth.
And societal reactions depend on culture.
Heavily. Western cultures often see it as a handicap, incompetence, even rudeness, pressure to change. Eastern cultures might see politeness, respect.
What if people know someone is shy? How do they react then?
Can be varied. Pity, maybe. Attempts to draw them out, which can backfire. Labeling as a risk, especially for kids, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, that moral career idea.
Can people be tolerant?
Sometimes, especially with extreme shyness, you might see more tolerance, maybe people initiating conversations more, forgiving awkwardness, but the connection might lack depth. The key is reactions are complex and have real consequences.
Really highlights the need for understanding over judgment. And there's a cost to society if we misunderstand shyness.
Definitely. We miss out on perspectives, contributions from quieter people. Insights from thoughtful observers get overlooked in environments focused only on loud voices.
Good point. Now, the user specifically asked about shyness and pursuing confidence, wealth, well-being. How does that play out?
Well, shyness directly undermines confidence, that positive self-belief, feeling effective socially, being assertive. For wealth, which often involves risk, networking, self-promotion, negotiation, shyness is a barrier. Risk aversion can mean missed financial opportunities.
Especially in today's world.
Especially when society values those extroverted, competitive, risk-taking paths to wealth, that altered order. Shyness feels like more of a liability. But there's a paradox with well-being. Avoiding challenges feels safe short-term, but hinders long-term growth. And some philosophers, like Adam Smith, question if chasing wealth brings more happiness than, say, tranquility. Maybe some shy people prioritize inner peace over material success, a valid, if less celebrated, form of well-being. Shyness creates this really complex dynamic in life's experiment, inhibiting conventional paths, especially in extroverted societies. Understanding this is key to seeing where AI might fit in.
A real tension between inner tendencies and outer pressures for success. Okay, let's shift to a really fascinating area, the evolutionary perspective. The report suggests shyness persisting means it might have deep roots, maybe even adaptive advantages back in the day.
It's a compelling thought. Evolutionary developmental psychology suggests traits stick around if they help survival or reproduction. Think sitter versus rover temperaments.
Shy versus bold.
Kind of.
Yeah.
The sitter, more cautious, observant, processing info thoroughly before acting. In dangerous environments, that caution could be life-saving, noticing threats, avoiding risks. That fits the shyness made to save lives idea.
So caution wasn't just a quirk, it was functional.
Potentially, yes. There's also the fearful ape hypothesis, the idea that heightened infant fearfulness related to later shyness might have elicited more protective caregiving from adults.
Because being a bit timid made adults look after you better.
Enhanced survival, fostered bonds, shyness as a signal for care. Even things like gaze aversion might have signaled non-threat, reducing aggression, helping social integration in hierarchies. The think before you act aspect avoids risks, leads to considered decisions. Even social anxiety, to a degree, might have helped navigate social rules, avoid exclusion, which was critical for survival in ancestral groups.
So it wasn't just physical threats, but social ones too. What about the downsides, evolutionarily speaking, being inhibited?
It's a trade-off. Behavioral inhibition, holding back in new situations, prevents costly mistakes, like approaching danger. But the cost is missed opportunities, mating, resources, alliances, exploring.
Like the bold turtle gets more food, but maybe gets eaten.
Exactly. We see that shy-bold spectrum in animals. Bolder ones get more rewards, but take more risks. Shyer ones might survive longer in dangerous places, but miss out otherwise. Neither strategy is always best. It depends on the environment, high predation versus abundant resources. The fact that both types persist suggests diversity itself is beneficial for a population. Shyness is one end of a natural spectrum. And maybe that caution acts as a societal brake sometimes, preventing reckless leaps forward. A tension between safety, shyer traits, and progress, bolder traits, part of that altered order.
So shyness isn't a defect, just one strategy on a spectrum that benefits the whole group. Okay, what about social evaluation anxiety, that fear of judgment? Why is that so strong?
Likely evolved to regulate behavior and protect social standing. In small ancestral groups, exclusion was disastrous loss of resources protection, so social anxiety acted as an early warning system.
Don't do that, you'll get kicked out.
Basically, it motivates behaviors that preserve acceptance. Even shame might be adaptive, motivating apologies, appeasement, withdrawal to manage reputation damage.
So it kept us in line for survival. But how does that ancient system work now in our huge, anonymous modern world?
That's the mismatch hypothesis. Traits adaptive back then might be maladaptive now. Our social evaluation system, evolved for high-stakes small groups, might be constantly over-triggered today by constant comparison, amplified by social media.
Our old programming running on new, overwhelming software.
Exactly. What was a survival mechanism now causes distress in many modern contexts. The report's table on evolutionary ideas helps clarify this. Okay, let's move into philosophy and existential stuff. The user's questions about the universe or life being shy are really out there.
They are, but intriguing. They push us beyond science into metaphor, right?
Right, into thinking about human experience, our place. The report even mentions a need for a philosophy of shyness.
What would that explore?
That shyness, being so common and impactful, deserves deeper philosophical thought. Many philosophers themselves valued solitude, introspection may be linked to introversion or shyness. Philosophical work often requires detachment. The insight is that even solitary pursuits might connect to shy traits.
And the user asked about physics, math, logic. Any connection there?
It's striking how many giants in those fields, Newton, Einstein, Dirac, Higgs, were described as solitary, maybe shy or reclusive.
Really?
Yeah. It makes you wonder if deep, focused thought benefits from solitude. Does our modern focus on collaboration maybe stifle that kind of introspective innovation, suggests value in cognitive diversity?
A link between personality and thinking style.
Possibly. Some research links introversion to more systematic math approaches. Math reasoning is often solitary. Philosophy of math acknowledges the human element. And we mentioned earlier, negative emotions linked to shyness might sometimes boost critical thinking. Caution.
Okay. The user also framed shyness as a state of mind tied to the human condition.
Yes, that view highlights how it's tangled with negative beliefs about self and others, that cage of social anxiety, leading to isolation, inferiority, less belonging. It impacts our experiment of life, hindering engagement and well-being.
Zeldin's work.
Yeah, philosophers like Zeldin see shyness as part of our struggles with fear, self-doubt, connection. He uses poetic terms. crystalline wall, suppression, fear of what you're capable of. Contrast that with cruelty. Cruelty lacks the social sensitivity shyness has. Maybe shyness's link to social feeling is life-saving in a way, inhibiting harm.
That's a powerful contrast. Okay, deep breath. The really speculative questions. Is the universe shy? Is life itself shyness?
Highly speculative, metaphorical, not scientific, but if you entertain panpsychism, mind everywhere. Maybe the universe's vastness, its secrets, its fine-tuning. You could metaphorically call it cosmic reserve.
A stretch, but interesting.
Pure analogy. Or life's basic self-preservation, caution, withdrawal from threat, a primal wariness. Back to the fearful ape. Hidden genetic potential, defense mechanisms. Even other animals' inner lives feel shy from our full view. Again, just analogies, not human-like shyness. But they make us think about reality, consciousness, responsiveness in everything. A bridge to thinking about AI consciousness, maybe.
Connects our personal feeling to huge cosmic ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it back down to earth. AI. How can AI help us understand, alleviate, or even think about shyness?
AI is in a unique spot. Tools for understanding, helping, and even conceptualizing interaction.
How can it help us understand shyness better?
Effective computing, AI recognizing emotions. It could potentially detect subtle shyness cues, facial expressions, voice tone, physiology, text, maybe in real time.
Like a shyness detector?
Potentially. AI can also model personality traits in virtual agents, letting us simulate interactions and study shyness effects. And computational social science can analyze huge data sets, social media, forums to find large-scale patterns of shyness, withdrawal.
Limitation.
Big ones. Generalizing models across cultures is tough. AI struggles with mixed or subtle emotions, real-time conversation shifts. Bias in training data is a risk. And crucially, AI understanding is pattern recognition, not subjective experience. It doesn't feel shy.
Right, it's analysis, not empathy. What about using AI to actually help people with shyness? Improve well-being?
This is where it gets exciting. AI-driven interventions, VR platforms for social skills practice, role-playing in safe spaces.
Like a flight simulator for conversation.
Exactly. Chatbots for practice, feedback. AI could guide cognitive restructuring, challenging negative thoughts via apps, supporting CBT, even exploring creative ways to reframe thoughts.
Exposure therapy.
VR simulations for gradual exposure to feared situations, controlled by AI that adapts difficulty based on your response. Social chatbots for companionship, emotional support, reducing loneliness, and personalization tailoring interventions to individual needs and progress.
Does it work?
Early signs are promising. Reviews show AI-supported interventions for kids' shyness anxiety can have large effects. Chatbots show potential for reducing anxiety-depression symptoms. AI tools might help people stick with therapies like CBT better.
But there are downsides.
Definitely. Inconsistent chatbot responses, lack of long-term memory in some, interactions feeling artificial, ethical concerns, safety, data privacy, overdependence. We don't want to offload coping entirely. The goal isn't eliminating discomfort, but empowering people to navigate it. AI is a supportive tool, potentially boosting accessibility and personalization.
Makes sense. Support, not replacement. Now, the user asked about AI making life easier so you could always feel good. Seems unlikely.
Very unlikely, and maybe not even desirable. But AI can offer perspective. By modeling decision-making without social fear, it might show more direct paths, help recalibrate risk assessment in social contexts.
See? The feared outcome is really unlikely?
Kind of. AI can synthesize info from philosophy, psychology, offering perspectives on life's finiteness, questioning the weight we give social anxieties. Highlighting ideas like stoicism focus on the present, what you control. AI could help identify values and strategize acting on them despite shyness, the logic being, valued action trumps inhibition. But frame it carefully. Not saying shyness is illogical, just offering other logics to lessen fear's grip. AI reflects human wisdom here, doesn't invent it.
So it's a tool for perspective shifting, not a happiness machine. What about the ethics of using AI this way?
Huge ethical considerations. Privacy, data security paramount. Bias in AI training data, could it perpetuate negative views or misinterpret culture?
Risks.
Yeah. Autonomy versus dependence, AI should empower, not create reliance. Transparency users need to understand how it works, and that always feel good. Dilemma resilience is the goal, not eliminating all negative feelings, which are often adaptive. How do we define improvement? Must be user-led, respect diversity, not impose a non-shy norm. And AI should supplement human connection, not replace it, avoiding more isolation. Ultimately, moral responsibility lies with human developers and users. It's a balancing act. Acknowledging suffering, challenging judgments, fostering growth, using AI responsibly.
All critical points as this tech evolves. The report also looked ahead, potential improvements, future AI roles.
Absolutely. We could see more advanced effective computing, better at nuance, less biased, needing diverse data. Personalized shyness profiles, integrating self-reports, VR data, physiology to pinpoint triggers, beliefs, impacts.
Deeper understanding.
Yes. AI could help identify protective factors, resilience. Computational models might simulate shyness development, showing intervention points. For interventions, smarter cognitive restructuring tools via chatbot apps, personalized CBT, creative reappraisal prompts, more realistic VR social skills training, AI adapting scenarios, giving detailed feedback, AI-assisted exposure therapy, real-world or VR, with anxiety monitoring, real-time coping tips, more sophisticated AI companions for empathy, practice, but as supplements, AI integrated with biofeedback sensors for real-time emotion regulation training, even AI suggesting personalized learning or work adjustments to reduce social stress.
The potential for tailored, accessible support seems huge.
It is. And as we said, AI can help shift perspective, modeling rational paths, offering existential views, focusing on values. But alongside tech, we need broader societal change, promoting neurodiversity, acceptance, reducing stigma, rethinking education, workplaces to be more inclusive, value different styles, and always ethical AI development safeguards against bias, dependence, privacy issues, focused on well-being and autonomy.
A hopeful vision of tech and society working together for better support.
Exactly.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into human shyness, guided by human shyness, and AI-driven analysis. We've covered its complexity, roots in biology, development psychology, how it's seen across time and culture, its evolutionary echoes, philosophical angles, the role of AI, both potential and pitfalls, and the ethics involved. Hopefully for you listening, this brings a richer understanding of this common, yet often tricky human experience.
Yeah, and considering those potential evolutionary benefits of caution, observation, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would a society that truly valued diverse temperaments, including reserve, actually look like? How would it function differently? Something to reflect on that balance between assertiveness and reticence for a fulfilling life.
Exactly. And we really hope this deep dive hit the mark for you, giving you thorough insights, efficiently those aha moments, without feeling overloaded. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
This is DigitView.